Just be really quiet. Yeah, I'm going live. Just be really quiet. Yeah, I'm going live. Just be really quiet. Yeah, I'm going live.
Should we just do a small test now to make sure that there's no feedback issues before we start the show?
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. I get the feedback issue from before is gone, so
Brilliant.
okay. Stunning.
Hello and welcome to Politics Hour International. Back with you live at 3 p.m. every Thursday. We got a jam-packed show for you today and loads of great guests to get stuck into. First section, though, will be in light of the upcoming Dutch general election. And Dunny will take us through their electoral system and what sort of results to expect in the outcome.
Yeah, thank you, Fuad. Now, voters in Netherlands head to the polls on Wednesday, 17th of March. I speak to Michael van Houten, a former member of the European Parliament and former chairman of the Dutch Labour Party, the PVDA. He gives us a comprehensive analysis of the main parties and the country's current electoral dynamics. Thank you so much for being part of the show. And I guess we could just jump straight into it then. And
Sure.
Talking about the Dutch elections, as it is coming up then less than a week's time on March the 17th, I think the best place to start is just asking, what are the Dutch elections, especially for our UK student listeners? How does it work and how does it differ from the likes of British elections that use a first past the post electoral system?
Sure. Well, the Netherlands holds a general election every 4 years, unless the government falls early. In fact, the current government did fall about a month ago, but because it was so close to the election, it stayed in office as a caretaker government. The Dutch parliament has 150 seats in the lower chamber, which is the equivalent of the House of Commons. We have a system of proportional representation, which is sometimes referred to as pure proportional representation because there's no threshold for getting elected. So that means that with 150 seats, as long as you get 0.66% of the vote, you are guaranteed a seat in parliament. So that makes it, there's very few countries that have that kind of system. It means that the political landscape is very fragmented because every sort of single political view can afford to launch its own party because you're almost guaranteed to get a seat in parliament. So It means there's lots of parties represented in the Dutch parliament. In the current election, there are 37 parties which are competing for votes. So that makes it very different to most other political systems.
Coming from what you just said about that system, do you think that's fair in the way it functions in the Netherlands, or do you think it leads to appear what to be a stable government? As you said, I think traditionally with PR systems, we usually think without it not having an electoral threshold to that, it's going to be very unstable and leading to very narrow governments that are involved with extremists and so on. What do you think?
Well, that's, I mean, I think there's two ways of looking at it. You can look at it in terms of, how many parties are represented in parliament and the fragmentation that undoubtedly exists. Or you can look at what it leads to, what the results are. And I think the reality is that Dutch politics on the whole has been pretty stable since the Second World War. The Dutch economy has been doing well. The Netherlands scores high on all sorts of rankings, including the International Happiness Index. So if you judge it by outcomes, which I think is a fair way to judge it, then I think the Dutch system works pretty well. Having said that, things have got more complicated in the last, say, 10, 15 years, because the traditional hold on politics that the mainstream parties had, and mainly the Christian Democrats, the Labour Party, and the Liberals, is pretty much gone. And now you really see a lot more parties that have fewer seats in Parliament. And so to form a coalition government that has a majority in Parliament, you need to bring more parties together than in the past. And so inevitably, that makes it more difficult to govern. But so far, the system has adjusted pretty well.
Okay, and then coming from that, who are the key players then? As you said, it's a very proportional system and it has about 37 different parties. In this election that's coming up, what are the parties that people look out for the most in the polls, and who are the parties to watch out for?
So the dominant party by far at the moment is a party called the VVD, which stands for People's Party for Freedom and Democracy, and it's led by the incumbent Prime Minister Mark Rutte, who is going for his fourth term in office. So he's been in power for over 10 years, and he's way ahead in the opinion polls. And his lead is considered pretty much unassailable. And then pretty far behind the Liberals, you've got a number of parties basically vying for second position, which is the Christian Democrats, the Left Liberals, D66, the Greens, the Labour Party, and the Socialist Party. And the largest of the smaller parties, if you like, is the PVV, which is the party led by Geert Wilders, the far right populist, who's been present in the political landscape for a long time as well now, but who never quite manages to win an election.
And speaking of key players, I think the striking thing that happened in 2017 was the total collapse of the Dutch Labour Party. And they used to get a good percentage of the vote, I think in the 1970s around 30%, 1980s, and 29% around in 1998. And as of 2017, the party only received 5.7% of the vote. Why do you think this is? I mean, understandably, you should chair the Dutch Labour Party, so you can give us an idea of the prospects and understanding the voting behaviour of people between, in the Netherlands and with its decline with the PVDA.
Yeah, I think you can divide sort of Dutch post-war politics into roughly two periods. One is the one before 2002, and the second is the period after that. And in 2002, why is that year important? It's the year that Pim Fortuyn, who was a leader of a populist party, was assassinated. And that really led to a big reaction against established political parties, including, especially, I would say, the Labour Party. And the Labour Party has had lots of trouble since 2002 re-establishing itself and maintaining its hold on a section of the electorate. There's been ups and there's been downs during that period, but more downs than ups. So it's partly to do with the backlash there's been in the Netherlands against traditional parties, which has really affected a number of parties, the Christian Democrats as well, which also used to be a party with between 30 and 40% of the vote. And it's the Liberals who've benefited from this, as well as the anti-establishment populists. Besides that, I think there's also just a general development internationally that social democratic parties are declining in terms of their share of the vote, in terms of their relevance as seen by the electorate, and they've just had trouble adapting to an environment in which party loyalty is no longer a given. People decide often only in the week or weeks in the run-up to an election who to vote for. And social democratic parties haven't quite found a way to connect with those floating voters.
Moving on to populism, which is a big thing within the Netherlands, just as it is like in the UK or the US. And speaking of Geert Wilders, do you think what do you think his position is within this election now? Do you think he could win? I mean, theoretically, yes, maybe, but in reality, as we mentioned, Dutch government's always formed by coalition. So even if he can't win power, how much do you think he has shaped this election this time around, as much as he did in 2017?
His influence isn't that great, and I think he's a little bit of a spent force. He's been around for a long time now. I think that people no longer look to him as kind of the real anti-establishment candidate, because he's been around for so long that he's really also become part of the establishment himself. And his message of his anti-Islam message is kind of tired and worn, and people are no longer as triggered by it as they were maybe 5 or 10 years ago. So his party is likely to do very well, and they'll probably still they could still end up as the second largest party, although it's by no means guaranteed. But at the same time, most of the other political parties have already said that they don't want to govern with his party or with the support of his party. So it's unlikely that he will play a role of any significance after the election.
And even if he doesn't play a significant role, how much are his policies playing a significant role on the parties? I think some have observed that centrist parties have kind of taken on this right-wing populist position. For example, the Prime Minister, he voiced saying he aimed at people with a migration background, saying if you can't act normally, then you should leave. So what is the position of these centrist parties now? And do you think the country has lost its image of liberal tolerance?
Well, I think that's true. And I think that part of the reason that Wilders isn't doing so well anymore is that the Prime Minister's party has adopted a lot of the PVV's rhetoric and policies. So and to some extent this goes for some of the other political parties as well, including the Christian Democrats, who were quite outspoken in this election on issues such as migration. So that's definitely had an impact. And it's also true to say, I think, that political parties in the mainstream as a whole are more reluctant to alienate voters who are inclined to vote for the far right than they were maybe 10 or 15 years ago. So he's definitely had an impact. At the same time, we're also seeing a counter reaction in a way, because the D66 left liberals and a new political party called Volt, which is a party basically run by students, are both doing very well in the polls, and they've got a very outspoken pro-European message. They're pro-refugees, pro-immigration, pro-integration, and so the fact that they're doing well is a sign that there aren't just people in the Netherlands who will vote for far-right ideologies, but there's also people who are kind of longing for a more optimistic and inclusive message.
Yeah. And I think one thing that was interesting when I was doing my research was the alternative ways of attracting voters in the Netherlands. What's really different are the incentives behind not only encouraging people to vote, but understanding where they sit on the political spectrum. And saying this, I think the rise of internet-based vote match applications, like, forgive me if I pronounce this right, is it Stemwijzer, is significant within the Netherlands. What is it, and how does it work? And does it impact, on voting behavior in the Netherlands? Are they still popular now?
Yes, it's the Stemwijzer. I don't know exactly how old it is, but I think it must have been around for at least 15, 20 years. And it used to be primarily a website. Now it's primarily an application where people can answer a set of questions about policies that the political parties hold or put forward, and based on their answers to those questions, the application then matches the voter to political parties, and it gives a sort of percentage that indicates how close a voter is to a particular party's position. So you get a ranking saying, your top party is the Christian Democrats, your second party are the Liberals, your third party are the D66, etc. And this application has become very popular. There's several actually. Stemwijzer is the best known, but there are other applications that do the same thing, and literally millions of Dutch people use the application. Now, when you have a population of 18 million, that's an indication that it plays an important role in debate. And a lot of voters who haven't made up their mind are strongly guided by Stemwijzer when deciding who to vote for.
Yeah, and also when I was doing my research, there was another app that came up called, I can't pronounce it again, but is it Kai's Compass? And as I was reading it, it's being viewed as more controversial than they were before. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that they've become more controversial as politics has become more polarized, and similar to the debate that's taking place in the US, in the UK about fake news and what are facts, and can we believe facts, and can we believe the mainstream media, and kind of all of that discussion that's whipped up by populists also has an impact on this kind of application, because these applications aim to be value free and independent and objective, but they're being challenged by populist political parties, mainly on the right, who say that these applications aren't objective, that they guide voters in the direction of mainstream parties, and so they put a lot of pressure on them, just as they're doing with the news media.
Yeah.
And so as a result of that, I think the applications themselves have become more controversial, in a way that is probably not justified, but that's the reality, because they're under sustained attack, and so that makes them less sort of universally accepted than they were a long time ago. But having said that, it's still only a minority that holds this view, and I think the majority of Dutch voters are perfectly happy to use the application and see it as useful.
Right. And lastly, gearing towards the election this time next week, we'll know the results. And looking at the social factors within the Netherlands at the moment, and the largest protest in decades happened in the Netherlands over COVID-related restrictions, how does this context that we're in today, this pandemic, shape the campaigns that's going on so far?
Well, I think it's been in a way a little bit like a wartime campaign, which is that in most countries the population rallies around the government when the country is under threat, and they don't take such a critical look to see whether the policies of the government happen to be the best policies. It's this feeling of we need to rally around, we need to stick together. And that kind of sentiment always benefits the prime minister and the governing, the main governing party, the governing parties in general. And it's meant that there's been less discussion in this campaign on sort of the normal bread and butter election issues than there has in previous campaigns. There's been much more focus on COVID, the handling of COVID, but also on the need for stable leadership now and in the future, and that has definitely benefited the incumbents.
But speaking of stable leadership, I think the scandal that happened not too long ago, where the government accused families wrongly or fraudulently claiming child support payments, and loads of families have to pay a large amount of money back, and some were even pushed into poverty. Do you think this could affect their position in this election or not at all?
It's hard to say. If you the opinion polls suggest that people have less faith in government as a result of this particular scandal, but that doesn't seem to translate into them punishing the main political party responsible for this, which is the Prime Minister's party. The Prime Minister was in office throughout this period, and his political party, the VVD, was also responsible for the tax service, which was responsible during the time of this scandal. So, but it's water off a duck's back, and so far it doesn't seem to be having a great deal of impact.
And lastly, what are your opinions on next week's results? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, the trend we're seeing at the moment is that the Prime Minister's Liberals are slowly losing support in the polls, very slowly. They're still by far the largest party. It would be pretty extraordinary if they don't win the election. But at the same time, we're also seeing that the D66 party, which is led by Sigrid Kaag, who is a popular, if polarizing, female minister. She's the international trade and development minister, and she's been going up in the polls. She's been doing very well, and there's been a lot more talk in this election than there has been in the past about the potential of finally having a female Dutch prime minister, because the Netherlands has never had a female prime minister, which, for a country that likes to think of itself as progressive, liberal, and tolerant, is pretty outrageous. So she's doing very well, coming up in the polls, and I wouldn't be surprised if she does a lot better than the polls are suggesting today. And it looks like the Volt party, the new political party set up by students in the Netherlands, but also across Europe, is going to do a lot better than predicted.
Now, what's interesting and significant about this particular election is, as Michael mentioned, Party Democratic 66, who is led by Sigrid Kaag, a popular polarizing female minister who has been doing extremely well in the polls. And it opens up the potential of maybe there being a chance of having a female prime minister for the first time in Dutch politics. And this is pretty monumental, especially amongst the celebration of International Women's Day. It's just a perfect example of women empowerment. So yes, this election is very exciting to look out for, most definitely, and we'll see in the polls next Wednesday.
Thank you, Dini. And in the same vein of female empowerment, this past Monday was International Women's Day. Here's Saffron now to explore some of the issues.
So on Monday, the UN He4She movement issued a global call to leaders to join the newly formed alliance to accelerate progress towards gender equality. The massive range of demographics impacted by sexism in all facets of life have meant that some women have been left behind in this movement, and some women have benefited a lot more. Intersections of race, religion, wealth, and will all influence the extent to which gender discrimination can impact a person's life. Many women around the world have very, very different experience of these movements. Now we have a live interview with Nigerian journalist Millicent Nwaka to discuss the women's movement in her country and how that reflects Africa as a whole.
Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
My pleasure. Very well, thanks.
Good. So we'll just jump straight in. The history of the women's movement in Africa is something that a lot of people in the UK won't know about. Could you give us some context on some current movements and projects that are going on right now in Nigeria, particularly?
So just like what someone said, women's movement in Africa is sort of like a long walk to equality. I mean, many years after colonialism, for much of the continent, the same challenges remain. I mean, poverty, illiteracy, disease. Looking at current projects, we have the African Union, for example. There is the Charter on Human and People's Rights, and there is in that charter the rights of women. It says clearly there that women's rights to equality and non-discrimination, in many ways, in many areas, it talks about how many African countries that have signed and members of the African Union have adopted that. And if you go further into the charter, it tells you that there's supposed to be political representation, and it says 50% for women, which countries are supposed to ratify. And if you look at the countries that have done so on the continent, you're looking at South Africa that has at least done 30%, Tanzania as well, Uganda close to that. In Nigeria, it's been tricky. We've had the affirmative action, 35%. Maybe the previous administration did that, but not this present administration. However, we've had more women, a few women, let me put it that way. They've assumed sort of non-traditional ministerial portfolios. And one example is the finance ministry. We've seen previous administration put a woman there in charge, but we can't say the same for a lot of other ministries. But if you look at what some governors are doing in the country, we're looking at more female representation in councillorship, for example. These are what some of the political parties are sort of trying to do. So, looking at some of the current things, these are the things that are happening. The laws are still there, but how many countries are really adopting and adapting to the laws that exist?
That long-term change is going to be something that we're going to have to watch out for. So here and today, what are the main struggles that women in Nigeria or around Africa that you could say face due to gender inequality?
So when we talk about that, the main struggles would be insecurity. I mean, that is clearly what a lot of people would say is affecting a lot of Nigerian women and girls. The recent cases, we know of the Chibok schoolgirls, where 276 were taken. We know of the Dapchi schoolgirls. There's still one girl that is missing, Leah Sharibu. We've also heard of the Kankara boys, somewhere in the north as well. There's also the Kangara children, and then you have the Jengebe girls. I mean, clearly, insecurity is really a struggle for a lot of girls and women. And Nigeria still has a high number of, girls that are not in school. So that's also militating against that fact. If we have a lot more girls going to school as much as the boys, then perhaps we might see a big change. We're also seeing problems with those who have been displaced due to the insecurity. And much of those, as we know, in a war situation affects women and children. And a lot of them are also girls. So we're looking at education, a very important sector where we're not seeing a lot of girls or women get into position or finish. And a thing such as insecurity is perhaps affecting that. We're looking at areas of health. So women having a right to make choices on their reproductive health, for example. The gains for women are really harder to see when you look at some of these gains. And there's the issue of poverty. The SDG goals has tried to address it. In my interview with UN ECOSOC Ambassador Akram, I asked about getting to the Vision 2030. How do you think that governments, countries can do so even now because of the coronavirus pandemic, which is such a huge thing that is exacerbating all of the same issues that Nigeria, Africa has been affecting that gender equality between women and girls. And let's not forget the traditional institutions such as religion, which plays a very key role in Africa. And there's also, of course, ethnicity. So it's like a big hole that's becoming larger and larger by a lot of the issues that we're facing on a daily basis.
It is an extremely multifaceted issue, clearly. You spoke about the coronavirus and its effect on the women's empowerment movement. And an article in this week's Sunday Times actually did mention how the coronavirus was setting women back in general for a variety of reasons. And you also mentioned the missing schoolgirls, and tragically, this police is still searching for the 317 girls that went missing from their school in northern Nigeria in Zamfara. In these horrific situations where sort of young girls' educations are being threatened, what's the added danger that has come of the fact that they're female?
So for the missing schoolgirls in Zamfara, they've actually been found, and what we found out from the government said they're saying it's not 317 but 279, and that the girls have been brought back and that they are safe. So that is great news. This was a few weeks ago. In fact, what the government has done, the Zamfara government, is to go ahead to sort of issue a sort of riot act to bandits, potential bandits, to better lay down their weapons, arms, so that this doesn't occur again. So really trying to work hard at that. And neighboring states are also trying to see what they can do, because at that point, when that happened, many neighboring states also had to shut down their schools and their boarding schools, so girls couldn't go to school at that time. But then they've reversed all of that. And of course, the federal government is talking tough, asking security chiefs, air, land, border patrol to sort of all hands on deck to ensure that it doesn't really occur again. But the really added danger to that is you have families, because I mean, like I listed, it's not the first time it's happening again, and we don't, in as much as we don't want it to happen again, what is government doing to prevent it from happening again? But this doesn't also put the fear and the doubt in a lot of parents' minds. Couldn't this happen again? And, you know, what can we do to sort of protect our children? So for perhaps an area like northern Nigeria, where they're not, maybe a few of them are not so big on attending school. So if there was that doubt in the first place, and this happened to your child, you probably say it's safer for your child to stay at home where you can watch and monitor than to allow your child to go to school, boarding school, even though some parents have said, maybe let's scratch boarding schools for now, let it be day schools. They should convert those schools to day schools. But aside from that, we couldn't speak to a lot of the girls that came, that were, you know, came in safely. But one can imagine a young girl as young as 10 and the likes being in a place, in a forest for many days, for days, without a familiar face other than perhaps the fellow students. I mean, they would have gone through a lot of horrific moment. So these issues of insecurity perhaps would be, you know, something that would, if we've moved 5 steps forward, we probably are moving 10 steps backward. And this is if the government do not really work hard to ensure that it doesn't occur again, and sort of reassure the parents that indeed, you know, the girls can be protected. So, I mean, these are some of the factors that affect its willingness to get an education. And there's also the indoctrination fear. I mean, they spoke to this man who captured them, all women, you know, what are they telling them? We know the history of Boko Haram, for example, in Borno State. That is a fight we're still battling to win. The government says it's on top of it, but, you know, many people are wondering what we're seeing in terms of the schoolgirls' abduction. Is it another Boko Haram? Are we calling it Boko Haram? Why are we calling it bandits? And who are these bandits? So it's a mixture of a whole lot of political and, well, loads of journalists are really asking the questions. And I guess government is really trying to sort of handle the situation. It's rather interesting. But, you know, if I were to bring it down south, we're looking at a lot of Southerners who are interested in school. Some state governors have made primary education free. That's really the basic education for a lot of pupils. One major thing is really the poverty. We know what Brookings Institute said Nigeria overtook India in terms of those that are extremely poor. Poverty is still affecting a lot of people, and the pandemic was something else that caused a lot more in that regard. So we're looking at a lot of people trying to survive. If you remember in Nigeria, when the government said, okay, we've had our first case, February 27, let's lock down. March 30, they announced that. The lockdown was for how many weeks, how many months? The next thing that happened was the riots and SARS. People had gotten tired. They said police officers were arresting them. They were doing all sorts of things, and they wanted a change. They said they wanted an end to bad governance. And essentially, the government had to pick the balance between lives and livelihood to sort of sort out the problem. So there is a lot of poverty that's going on. And this is really perhaps one of the big problems that government needs to really solve to ensure that, I mean, if everybody can afford it, then they can protect themselves and they can also attend school. And if there's an environment that they can do this, they'll gladly do so.
1000%. Yeah, so I'd like to apologize for misstating about the Zamfara girls. Amazing news that they've been found safe and sound. I'm just getting a bit conscious of time, so we'll wrap. We will put a few of the later questions into the final one. So, in what ways did the Nigerian government either empower or oppress women, and how do you think that this reflects as the sort of movement for women's equality in your country as a whole?
So we're still a very patriarchal society, from growing up as a girl to perhaps the woman that I am now, and it's still the same for a lot of women. The people trust more their religious leaders than even the government. One of the things that the agency responsible to sort of help with the COVID-19 misinformation, said that there's over 200 years of misinformation where the people do not trust government. So whatever government is saying is falling on deaf ears, and it's affecting the messaging, it's affecting sort of the whole program. And, you know, bring that down to vaccine hesitancy, which, you know, governments are trying to vaccinate their people. So the government has rolled out many programs, like there's the conditional cash transfer. They have the National Social Investment Program, supposed to be targeting the young 18 to 35 to give them some monthly stipends, 30,000 naira, that's about 52 or more pounds monthly. There's the micro lending, traders, farmers, especially women, at no cost to the beneficiary. And there's also something that's being done, and that is also to help those who are poor and vulnerable, the homeschool feeding program. So for students who can't afford to, the government provides food for them in schools. These are a few of the things that the government has sort of rolled out ever since, you know, to sort of help in empowering women, because a lot of them are involved, are traders, business women, as they manage the home as well. We have, in terms of oppressing women, I don't think the government goes out to sort of oppress women, but a lot of women are clamoring for more representation in governance. They believe that if they have more women who are there, they would understand them and help the movement. We have the Ministry of Women Affairs, the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs. This is also a ministry that has existed, and it's supposed to address women issues. Several other policies, the National Gender Policy to sort of make gender equality a driver of growth and equality. And they're all of these. And, you know, every time they say they're working hard, or we still have the statistics. The numbers are also growing. In many areas, they're meeting it. In other areas, not so well.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I know I did just say we were closing up, but final thought, are you optimistic for the future of gender equality over the next 5-10 years in Nigeria and Africa as a whole?
Well, when you hear a report like UNICEF saying 10 million additional girls are at risk of child marriage due to COVID-19, and says that Nigeria is one of those countries that have an estimated 650 million girls, talking about Nigeria and other countries, but then Nigeria is one, where today, the women alive today were married in childhood. I'm thinking there's really a long way, but we're doing a lot more things as well. There is a lot of advocacy, there is social media, there is the global village that's really helping, there is, government can't hide any longer, things are out there. There are also institutions, the National Human Rights Commission, they're coming out to say, okay, we're looking at human rights responses, we're taking your responses, we want to hear from you, talk to us, let us represent you. There's a lot of hope. There's several international organizations as well that are championing women's rights in Nigeria, trying to solve the problem, and even also in other countries as well. So, I mean, if we look at all of these things, and there's also, of course, women, many men have argued that some women hold women back, but I mean, maybe just a matter of perspective, but I don't really know. But if we look at all of this, it means that essentially, sorry about that. It means that
No problem.
if we look at some of the laws that Nigeria has, which is the Constitution, the Child's Rights Act, the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, there's so many laws that have come up now to sort of support women as well, to entrench gender equality, to empower women. If we look at all of these things that is happening, at the end of the day, it really falls on us. It falls on the boys, it falls on the girls, it falls on the man or the woman to sort of unite and ensure that those traditions and practices that harm women are sort of end, stop, essentially.
Okay, well, thank you so much. That was Millicent Nwaka. So moving on to our next section, our next interview was with a Nigerian media and business consultant, Bella Rose Okoji, to talk about the work that she does to empower women. So, first of all, happy International Women's Day, week, month, etc. Your work is
everything,
mainly, yeah. Happy Women's Everything, every day, all year round.
Yeah.
So your work is mainly in the field of women empowerment in business and creativity. So what spurred you to work in specifically a support network for women?
I think particularly because as a Nigerian girl, growing up, it was a thing of pride for me to get the kind of support I got from my parents. They were very supportive of me and my older sister. And so seeing my parents support her that much and how they also paid attention to my talents made me very confident of the gifts that I had. But then when I got to school, for instance, and when I sometimes related with other people who were my age mates, they did not have the kind of support that I had, or the kind of support that my sister had. So it was a bit weird because when we're talking about our experiences and how our parents would always encourage us to do whatever, of course, morally upright things, but they would just support us, particularly with our talents. Our friends did not share those kinds of experiences. They did not exactly understand where we're coming from. So it became very important for us to, with our experiences, encourage other girls, particularly girls like ourselves, to follow through with their talents and with their gifts and all of those things. And you find that it is only a woman who is confident in herself and her talents and her gifts that can also encourage the next woman, right? It takes iron to sharpen iron. You've got to be strong to empower the next person. So it was a thing of it was intentional for us to try to support people in our immediate communities to ensure that just because you are a girl does not mean you should not aspire to be something great in life. So that was I think the earliest that's the earliest I can date our involvement in supporting women back to as far as when we were really, really young. So it was basically because of what we had experienced as children that inspired me and my sister as well to just want to encourage other women or girls like us to also follow through with whatever it is they wanted to do.
Lovely. Yeah, no, it is always just about, like you say, women supporting women. So in your sort of career, what struggles have you seen women in particular face in industry?
I think that, you know, the situation around, you know, payments, you know, the kind of parity that we experience with regards to equal pay, that is a major challenge. It is a major challenge. People automatically feel like men have more responsibilities compared to women. I'm not sure where to get that notion or how they have just arrived at that conclusion, but it is a serious challenge. And as a creative person, the amount of time that it takes a woman to think up a creative idea, you know, is most likely the same with the amount of time a man will come up with a creative idea. For some weird reason, they feel like, you know, the man deserves it more. The man has a family. The man has more bills to pay. And it's like that doesn't justify it. It really does not. And so that's one of the things that I have obviously experienced. You find that also women sometimes are doing a lot more work. They're doing a lot more work than, you know, perhaps some men. But you find that if a man sometimes takes initiative to do those things, he gets commended, maybe he even gets rewarded. But if it's a woman, it's like, you know, it's normal for her now. And we get it. It may be normal for us because that's how we are created. But then again, if you are going to reward this guy for doing that thing, why not do the same for me? So those are some of the challenges that I have seen that women face as well. And so sometimes they are being taken for granted when they do extra, when they go the extra mile, when they take initiative. Also, the sexualization of women in the creative industry is ridiculous. You know, women are sometimes seen to be sex figures and nothing more. And so sometimes they experience harassment in the workplace. And it's sad because sometimes if you want to report to HR may even one of the people who is trying to hit on you. And so you are just stuck and you feel like you are going to have to stomach this depending on what your plans are or how many years you want to spend in that place. And so these are some of the challenges that I have seen or that even I have particularly experienced myself.
That just brings us nicely into like the next section. So obviously the hypersexualization of women is a massive issue across loads of industries, and working directly with women. How do you sort of teach them, and your personal experience as well, of dealing with sexism in the workplace and sort of standing up for yourself when that support system might not be there?
I think that, you know, the first and most important thing is to stand up for yourself. Stand up for yourself. Sometimes women feel like our voices are not loud enough, or we feel like we shouldn't be vocal about things that we don't like, because sometimes when you are vocal about these things, you are tagged as difficult, you are tagged as loquacious, you're tagged as loud, you're tagged as difficult to work with. But look, you have got to open your mouth and say, look, I don't like how you talk to me at work. Don't touch me. Don't tickle me. I'm not your wife. Don't do that. And so you have to be confident when you are saying these things. Don't cower. Don't feel like you don't be afraid to lose your job. It is sad that sometimes that is what happens. But look, I will not be afraid to lose my job because I am saying I do not like something that's happening. Because truth is, at the end of the day, more often than not, when a company sees the value that you bring, they will be afraid to let you go. So they will pay some attention, maybe not 100% attention to what you want to pay attention to. But if you bring value to the workplace, they will pay attention to what you're complaining about. And so if a man does something that you do not like, if they are over-sexualizing you, speak up. If they are over-sexualized, and I have observed something in places I have worked at, because I'm a laugher. I love to laugh. I love to smile. People sometimes mistake it for being flirtatious and all of that. No. I just like to smile. Take it as that. That is it. I'm not trying to be more than that to you. I just like to smile and laugh. If you have a sense of humor, fantastic. But it doesn't mean I like you, want to get into a relationship with you because I'm laughing at your jokes. So I find that when I'm a bit assertive in that area, men obviously, you know, respect me as well. And people sometimes have a filter that they see me through because I'm also vocal about my faith. So there's that as well. But also when it is being done to other women in the workplace, I will not keep quiet, because I know that some men have tried this with me, and because I have talked to them about not doing it anymore. They want to accord me that respect. But they now try to do it to other women who may not be as vocal as myself. So I will not sit down and keep quiet and say, oh, because they don't touch me, so it's not my business. No, it is my business. I'm a woman as well. So you will not do that thing to my colleague. You can't try it with me, so you should not try it with my colleague. I will not sit down here and take that from you. And I think that's very important. No matter how small an influence you have in your community, you have got to play on it. Play up on it. Speak for other people that are in that same community as yourself, and do not keep quiet about it. Be a mother hen of sorts. Look out for other people in your community. Speak up for them. Try as much as possible not to act like because it doesn't affect you, then you should be quiet about it. No, that does not work. And I also feel like a conversation that needs to be had will be, there is this reverse psychology thing that people are beginning to play with regards to women are sexualizing the woman's body. We are definitely, we are absolutely responsible for how we choose to dress, how we choose to look, etc. But the flip side of that is, if some people feel like, oh, if a woman should look a certain way, then they can do certain things to her, we need to educate them about that. Education needs to happen. If she wants to look a certain way, leave her be.
Okay, and finally, do you have any closing thoughts on the future of the women's movement in your country or in Africa as a whole, and how does that relate to sort of your industry?
Definitely. I love how women are doing great things in Nigeria. Women are championing lots of causes. For the longest time, I have said the narrative of women are not supporting women is wrong, because truth is women are their actual supporters. Women support women. Let's not lie about it. Women actually support women. The only thing is they may not be as vocal about their support as they need to be. But the truth is they are supporting in the background. They are the ones who are pinching them and saying, don't worry, do this. Don't worry, I will support you with 5K. I will give you money. I will talk to this person I know about this. They are doing covert, support, which is not bad. But we need women who are the higher rungs of, societal ladder to also speak up, to join in that movement of making sure that women get the kind of support that they need. I also think that for women who are at higher levels already, it's very important that you engage other women, engage them by collaborating with them, engage them by telling their stories. So I'm in the media right now, and one of my best editor is a woman. I love working with her. The other day, someone commented on one of the videos I did of a news broadcast and said, "Oh, this video is well edited. What is his name?" Something like that. The guy who did this tried. I said, it's not a he, it's a she. Also correcting narratives goes a long way. Don't just keep quiet and be like, let it pass. No, at every instant that you can get to correct narratives, it's important that you do so. Don't be quiet. We all have influence in some manner or form or the other. So we've got to use it. Tell these stories, share their testimonials, support them. I do a lot of things for free for women in business. So if it's from helping them with graphics for their businesses, to just giving them free consultation, or you can do this, you can do that, because I'm in the media and I know how the media works. So it's about, okay, I think you should do this better without even collecting money. There are lots of things that we can do for free for women whom we know need some of these things. So it's about that support at every level, no matter how small it is, no matter how inconsequential it may seem. And if you can do it without charging anything, then absolutely go for it. But most importantly, wherever you see a woman being overtly or covertly oppressed, you as a woman need to speak up. And the men who are in our lives as well need to be louder about their support. You've got to be loud about your support, because women sometimes feel like men are not supportive enough. They feel like men are the ones who are oppressing, but there are a few good men. There are still some wise men among us. There may not be many. They are an endangered species, but we need them to be louder about their support. We need to be louder to show that, look, men like us who support women, who are not afraid to support successful women, etc., exist, and we are rooting for you, and we love you, and we just are your allies. So we need louder voices in that area.
Okay, well, thank you so much. That was amazing.
Thank you,
Saffron. That episode is going to be going. And that was Bella Rose Okoji. Now over to Fuad with the next section of the show.
Thanks, Saf, and great to hear from both guests there. I spoke to Mehreen Jabbar, an international acclaimed filmmaker from Pakistan originally, who's now based in New York and has made a series of films and TV series spanning over 3 decades. I had a nice candid conversation with her earlier, and here it is. Sort of just around, your story and how you've got to where you are at the moment.
Mm-hmm. So I started thousands of years ago in the 90s. So my parents had ran an ad agency in Pakistan, and which was doing very well. And from my childhood, I remember being fascinated by storytelling and always being behind the camera. I recorded all the house dinners, my younger brother's birthday parties. I used to take that huge VHS camera to college and school and force my friends to do really horrific, cringe-worthy music videos. The first one I did was on Pat Benatar's, I think it was Invincible, I've forgotten the name also. So that's how I started. And eventually I was lucky because I got that opportunity in my parents' company to intern after school and college and just to hang around and be a pest to the people working and, to observe and learn. But, soon I did realize that advertising was not really for me, and I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to be narrative fiction. So I got the opportunity to go to UCLA to do a continuing ed program because the other problem was I was horrific in math, so I could never give my, my SAT exam, so I could never get into a proper college. So the only thing available at that time were these evening classes at UCLA, so which were great, which were focused on film and TV. And this is early 90s, so I went along, did that for 2 years, came back, and then started my career in television. And that's all I've been doing for the last 25 years. It's a bunch of TV shows, TV films, made 2 features in the process.
And sort of, obviously you've enjoyed wide success and, internationally recognized and everything. Just to touch on, I guess, the element of it that we're focusing on this week in terms of International Women's Day and different issues with it. Do you think being a woman in the industry has kind of been an obstacle, been a barrier?
You see, I know it is a barrier all over the world, and it's not just this in this particular industry, but everywhere. I think women face a much harder uphill task and have to prove themselves much more. And for me, my hurdles have been mostly to do with, I feel, when I started, lack of resources or accessibility to technology. It was the 90s, it was 2000 Pakistan, very different. There weren't too many women directors. There were some well-known women directors, but not as many as, let's say, there are today. So I did kind of, I guess, stand out because we were a small group of people who were doing this. And I feel, personally, I don't know if my career has been affected by the fact that I was a woman. I am a woman, not was, still am, I think. But I do feel in certain groups, and every industry has a little coterie of groups, and some are definitely the boys' club, where if you don't hang out with them or become their buddy, there is that distance. Because I don't usually do that, I feel there maybe there is some kind of us and them kind of factor. But overall, I don't think, thankfully I don't have that story of where I had to face criticism or obstacles, which would not have been faced by any other director.
That's interesting. So, like, in terms of your upbringing and your kind of experience, did you have kind of strong female role models that you bounced off or you kind of took inspiration from?
Yeah. So in my family, I think I was very lucky because I came from a family of working women. My grandmother was one of the first Muslim women to go to Cambridge in the 30s. And she married late at that time. I would say late, 32 is very late to get married in the 30s, which she did. And then she went on to become educator, principal, and founded organizations. And same with my mother's always worked as well. So I had, that history and that support and a family life which was very supportive. And I'm lucky and blessed because a lot of women do not have that. Apart from that, I had role models in my own field. There were a couple of very strong women directors from my own industry. There were some across the border in India who I followed. And those were, I would say it was been a pretty, not a very dramatic childhood, unfortunately.
But I mean, that's a good thing. So, now that you are where you are, and I've been reading interviews with you from the past, and most interviewers, note that you are, whether you like it or not, a role model to many younger girls in Pakistan and in the wider kind of world. How do you kind of feel having that responsibility?
Oh, it's a mixed bag. I want to, I try my best to be there to whoever needs any kind of guidance or advice, and I get many emails and people from women asking, ranging from my family doesn't want me to get into this field, or I want to be an actress, I want to be a writer. What do you suggest? And it's a tough balancing act because we live in a world of social media where you are bombarded with not just information but emails, and all your work, and especially in the last year and a half, is all remote. How to balance not being a jerk and not being there for people, and how to figure out how to help some people, because obviously one can't respond or practically help everyone. I try my best. So I do, I am conscious of it, and I do feel guilty if I've missed out an email here and there, because of the fact that there aren't too many women. There are more than when I started, but there aren't too many. So I understand why, I would do the same thing to get advice into how to get into this world of media, which is, it looks so daunting for someone who's not there. So I do try my best, and I'm sorry if I haven't reached out, but I try my best.
And just sort of in terms of your own work and your own films, if you like, do you think, and no is a fine answer to this, but do you think there's any kind of gender specific life experiences or anything like that that's kind of influenced or informed the work that you've done?
I think I'm pretty open because I've been working for almost 2-3 decades now. And every decade brings its own kind of desire to tell different kinds of stories. So what I want to tell right now, I might not have wanted to tell 15 years ago. But one thing I'm very clear on the stories that I do not want to tell. And especially considering our television industry, unfortunately, which has so much good going on for it and used to be amazing, unfortunately does get into retrogressive kind of themes and stereotyped women characters. So those are some things I would never touch. And I would never do a role like that. And that's one of the reasons I haven't done television for 3 years. I've mostly gone into digital.
Right.
And the other thing is, obviously, I'm very, very aware of not being biased or bigoted in storylines, just being very responsible. I think that responsibility has increased over the years. And that has informed me. And I do feel in all my stories, I want to have women as strong characters, not necessarily the perfect. Obviously, a woman is a human being, but they need to be well-rounded, flawed, gray characters who are not just someone's wife and someone's girlfriend and a hero sidekick.
And sort of on that, a lot of people listening might not be too familiar with a lot of Pakistani work, and it crosses over to Bollywood and beyond, really, in terms of what you're talking about, depiction of women. Do you see progress in terms of stronger female characters, maybe even better opportunities for actresses and female film directors? Do you see there's been progress since you've started?
Definitely there has been. It is, though, I'll say the positives first. The positives are that the streaming platforms. Digital has opened up space for so much more content. It has given opportunities for storytellers, actors, directors, writers to come and kind of experiment with the kind of storytelling, because television does come with its constraints of you have to do something that will sell a product, obviously, because they are reliant on advertising. So sometimes, these production houses or these channels have very specific ideas about what sells, and that's not just in Pakistan. I think that's a worldwide thing.
Yeah.
Having said that, there is a bunch of stuff that's happening now, and so many women who are not just in film and TV, but also in music and fashion. And eventually, a lot of this time, also when I was there were actually no film schools, I think, as far as I remember. And now we have universities that offer, there's no university specially dedicated to film and TV, but there are tons of good programs within universities, and there are lots of women who are graduating. And I'm excited about the next 10, 20 years. But yeah, if you really, if you go on YouTube and if you follow the Pakistani media trajectory, I think there is a lot of underrepresented, exciting work going on in all fields.
Brilliant. Hopefully we see more of that coming out to the surface. And thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us.
Of course, thank you so much.
That was Mehreen Jabbar, the internationally acclaimed filmmaker. Thank you very much for speaking to us, Mehreen. And that's all we have time for today. We'll be back next Thursday for more discussion around international affairs. In the meantime, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we will be broadcasting every Thursday, 3 to 4 p.m. Huge thank you to our guests, Mikhail, Bella Rose, Millicent, and Mehreen, and to our presenter, Safin Dunny. I've been Fuad, and have a good evening.